What is going on, everybody? So it seems like the mighty have fallen, and the spotless beard has revealed its red herring. Seems like the Steam OLED has a lot of issues within the first few weeks. And honestly, I really don't care if the OLED has a ton of issues in the first few weeks. I know that a lot of these issues are going to get better. I mainly just wanted to look over some of the issues and see if they're actually serious enough to not buy an OLED. So seeing here, the first issue, I think, is kind of a common one. It's not specific towards the OLED, but it seems like some of the Steam Deck OLEDs are shipping with dead pixels. Now, OLED screens have a history of faulty pixels and discoloration, and that's a big issue, especially since OLED screens focus on color accuracy, brightness, and seamlessness. And if you have a dead pixel in there, or discoloration, then you're going to be able to tell the difference more so than with an LCD screen. But like I've said over and over again, the original Steam Deck shipped with a ton of issues, but the astounding support from Valve overshadowed those issues. And with the Steam Deck OLED, I feel like it's the same thing here, where the problems are numerous and alarming, but I feel like Valve is just going to give the same amount of effort and support they gave to the original Steam Deck and their customers. So going down the list here, it seems like the next issue is the thumbsticks are apparently sticking, so they make sort of a clicky sound, which is also something that's very common with analog sticks, especially if a controller is mass-produced or a handheld system is mass-produced. The manufacturer is eventually going to run out of the most high-quality plastic, or they're going to shape the mold under the thumbstick a little off. So sometimes the cutout of the thumbstick tends to stick to the sides, unironically. And with the Steam Deck OLED, it seems like it's having that same issue where it makes sort of a annoying clicky sound, which kind of goes against the silent aspect of the Steam Deck. I feel like the Steam Deck out of any handheld is the most silent. With the ROG Ally, those buttons make a ton of noise. Not really a ton of noise, but they make a considerable amount of noise to wake up a person that's next to you in bed. So if the Steam Deck is making these slight clicky noises while moving the analog stick, I feel like that would get annoying for somebody trying to sleep. But if you're awake or if you have a headset on, it's probably not going to bother you all that much. So I feel like you could just live with that. It's not really a big issue. A lot of controllers do it at first, especially Nintendo Switch controllers like the Pro controller, and eventually it does go away because you wear out the controller. So that's not a big issue at all. And the next issue on the list, and there are surprisingly a lot of issues with the Steam Deck OLED just looking at everything. It seems like almost every aspect of the Steam Deck OLED is an issue besides the actual core hardware. But it seems like the analog sticks are also rubbing against the sides of the Steam Deck's front plate, which is something that happened with my Steam Deck. And I initially thought that it was going to just keep sawing away at the analog stick until it's just severed, but that never really happens. It just goes up to a certain point and there's just a little cut. It also happened with the RG Ally. So again, you could send this for RMA, but I really don't think it's a big deal. The only thing it's going to affect is the paint on the front and sides of the analog sticks. And if you do care about aesthetic that much, then yeah, send it for RMA. And the next issue is the A, X, B, and Y buttons are a little too rattly and they kind of move around. And honestly, the ROG Ally's buttons also do that, but I can't imagine the Steam Deck's buttons doing that since they're so small. So I would assume that's a sort of jarring feeling to have tiny rattly buttons. It's sort of a strange issue that didn't exist with the LCD Steam Deck, apparently. And I do think if you have that issue, there is something wrong with the buttons because small buttons like that shouldn't be rattling. It shouldn't be moving around the socket that much. So I do think that's kind of a big issue and you should send it for RMA. And the next issue is a known issue that I've been dealing with since I got the Steam Deck LCD, and that is the B button sticking. Now, none of my ROG Ally buttons stick at all, surprisingly. I hear a lot of issues about that, but I've tested the buttons, I've pressed them really hard and nothing seems to happen. But with the Steam Deck, the B button always sticks. So that's kind of a nuisance to me. And sometimes, about 5% of the time, it prevents me from playing my Steam Deck a little longer because I just get annoyed with the button sticking. It doesn't stick too much, but it sticks about 20 to 25% of the time, depending, I guess, how hot it is in the room. So yeah, I do recommend if you are going through that to just send it back and to get replacement buttons because it is sort of annoying, like I said before. And now another issue, which is a big deal for me personally, is the D-pad is sort of difficult to press. And that's very strange because the original Steam Deck's D-pad was very easy to press and maneuver combos. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but the original Steam Deck Deck's D-pad was pretty awesome, I'll be honest. So having the D-pad extremely hard to press, and also the directions on the D-pad seem to be colliding with other directions. So it seems like when somebody presses up, they most likely press left or right as well. Maybe some kind of sensor inside is offset since they're making the Steam Decks faster. So with mass production, this is a very common thing. Usually production quality goes down by about 20 to even 30%. So this is a very common issue, the fact that some sensors are misaligned. But if you are going through this issue, and personally for me, if I was going through this issue, I would just send back the Steam Deck right away. And surprisingly, the list does not end there. It seems like the trackpad's haptic feedback is very weak with the Steam Deck OLED. And this has been an issue with the original Steam Deck for me. Sometimes the haptics just won't work. And since this is technically new hardware with different kind of haptics, they do need to sort of calibrate them a little better over time, just like what they did with the original Steam Deck. So yeah, if you're going through that, don't send it back for RMA. It's most likely a software issue, and the sensors just haven't been calibrated properly yet. So I don't think this is a big deal at all. This happened with the original Steam Deck, where either the haptics don't work or they just activate by themselves. Very strange. And now one of the last issues would be the right and left bumper buttons seem to make a lot of noise. And with the original Steam Deck, the bumper buttons didn't really make noise at all. And with the original bumper buttons, they didn't really make a lot of noise. In fact, I don't think they made any noise whatsoever. It was just a tiny, solid click. It wasn't really one of those hollow clicks that are kind of annoying and they echo through the handheld. But some people are apparently putting Vaseline into the right and left bumper buttons, and I honestly think that's not a good idea because it'll seep into the system and it just won't prove to be good for your system's health over time. I think if you are worried about the sound of the bumpers being too loud, then you should probably just send it back for RMA. And it's a shame because there are a lot of small issues like this that can prove to be a nuisance over time. And it seems like the last issue could be a big one. It seems like some people are having trouble with the audio jack. When they plug in their headphones, for some reason there's a lot of static noise. And I'm going to chalk that up to being an audio driver issue. Perhaps they ship some out without properly updating the audio jack to be compatible with all headphones. And having an audio issue overall would most likely be a driver issue. That can easily be fixed. But if they're static, that can also be a wiring issue. So this one's a little bit of a tricky one because I would suggest sending it for RMA, but also waiting. It could be a 50-50 shot of either having a technical issue with it or a software issue. And it seems like a lot of these problems are happening with the 1 terabyte model and the limited edition model of the OLED Steam Decks. But like I said, there were a lot of problems with the original Steam Deck. I didn't experience any of them. Maybe I experienced the analog rubbing, the B button sticking, and a lot of other things that were just a nuisance with the software. And a couple nights ago, my Steam Deck was displaying some kind of weird message saying that there were 3 errors, and if I wanted to boot up from the internal M.2 or something else, it seemed like the OS had some kind of malfunction after I updated it. So there are still currently issues with my Steam Deck, and it even showed that there were a number of errors with it. But yeah, if you are experiencing any of these issues with your Steam Deck OLED, with any of the models, then I do suggest sending it back for RMA. But it is a shame that the Steam Deck OLED's release hasn't been a smooth one. It's showing that there's a lot more work on Valve's side, especially with the Steam Deck OLEDs. But I'd say about 70% of these issues can just be solved by waiting or wearing out the Steam Deck a little more. But yeah, that's all I got to talk about today. Hope you guys have a good one. Later. And the next Grand Theft Auto title I tested was Grand Theft Auto San Andreas Remastered. And I managed to get, again, 2 hours and 30 minutes at 10 watts silent mode. And with 1080p default settings, I managed to get 30 FPS. But again, at 720p, you can get 40 FPS, or 900p, you can get 35 FPS. So if you want the frames to be a little higher, then you could set the resolution lower. And you get around 5 to 10 more minutes of battery life with lower resolution settings. And of course, all of these remastered titles had issues when they first released. But I played a good amount of all 3 titles, and for the most part, they don't really have those glitches that they did day one. I mean, I would expect them not to because it has been about a year and change. It would be more surprising if they didn't get rid of some of these issues, or at least most of them. But yeah, for the most part, all these Grand Theft Auto remastered titles do play extremely well for the resolution I set them at. And the next title on the list, and certainly not the least, we have Grand Theft Auto 4. And this is a game that's given me a certain amount of issues on the Steam Deck and really any PC I tried on. There are a certain amount of language issues and resolution issues I had to get past. But if you manage to do the research and get it to work with the ROG Ally, you'll end up getting about 3 hours.